Oh.
Okay. I will call to order a meeting of the Wilsonville City Council for our work session on Monday, October 3rd at 5:33 p.m. And we'll start by asking if councilors have any comments on the order of agenda or items on consent. Okay, seeing none. Any councilor concerns? Councilor Lehan.
I guess I just was going to ask, because I can't recall where we were going to have a discussion about it, but about the Kinsman Oak and where things are with Morgan's report and relative to the pipeline thing, and then the other report is about the ash report, the ash tree report.
Ash beetle or?
Well, the beetle, but they were going to give us an assessment of how many trees are at risk. I just happened to have guests here from Pennsylvania, and they said there is not an ash tree left in Pennsylvania.
I think I sent out the latest email on the Kinsman Oak. I believe I forwarded that to you. Okay.
Right.
And then I think I sent out the PowerPoint presentation that we received at the managers meeting, and that we have included money in the budget to have an assessment done of our natural areas. But we are also queuing up a presentation to council, hopefully for first or second meeting in November, to go into more depth about what we are going to do.
Okay.
On both of those?
Because mostly
no, that's on the
ash thing.
On the ash, but yes, as we get more information on the Kinsman Oak, that will.
There wasn't a conclusion in those emails that I could see.
Right.
And I don't know what's the stage of the pipeline project, because the suggestion was it might put the tree at risk.
I think that portion of it is on hold until we figure out what's going on with that tree. But Dan, do you have anything on the Kinsman Oak beyond the email that I received? Okay, so I think that's the latest. But if you have specific questions, Counselor, maybe we can connect tomorrow.
I didn't realize it was on hold while we're waiting for something. Do we know when we might get more definitive?
I don't, but I will get you an answer tomorrow, and I will forward that response to Council.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so given what we find out there, we could schedule another, an update at a later meeting. We know.
Will do.
Thank you. We'll now begin our pre-council work session on this subject with Mr. Pauly on Frog Pond East and South Master Plan.
Good evening, Council. Good to be with you again to talk about Frog Pond East and South. Give me a moment. All right. So for this work session, we've had a few of these now. We're going to talk infrastructure. And following that conversation, happy to touch on any other topics briefly that you'd like, and just we'll look at how it looks as we go through the end of the year. And with me tonight, I won't be doing much of the talking tonight. With me, we have here in the room, we have Scott Manser and Jenna Bogart from DKS and Associates. Jenna will be doing the traffic portion of the presentation with Scott here to support. Also, over Zoom, we have Mike Carr with Murray Smith and Associate, or Murray Smith, and Joe Dills with MIG. So getting into infrastructure, I want to start by clarifying the numbers of units. This can get kind of confusing when we start talking infrastructure, because there's all these numbers thrown around that what's what. So just to be clear, I'd define these as actual, which is like the actual draft estimated capacity that we're looking at putting into master plan. That's 1,587 units right now. That's based on the urban forms that have been mapped and that we've talked about, as well as what is the actual net developable acreage as we look at it. This next one I'd call buffer, 1,800 units. So that's a little above the 1587 on purpose. That's what's being used for infrastructure modeling, so it's often referred to in this material as 1,800. But that's because, just to be safe, always, for whatever unanticipated thing that we want to, it's a practice to add a bit of buffer when we're planning infrastructure. So, because you never want to have to dig up a pipe and replace it. Then you'll see reference to this 2,400 units. I call this academic. We're not planning on putting anything about it in the master plan or even in the final version of these documents. This was a request from the state, who helped fund part of this project, to really do an academic study. If we, long-term in 100 years there was infill, that this went to 2,400 units somehow, could the infrastructure support it, or what changes in infrastructure would have to happen? So that was just an academic question that we answered, but we're really not incorporating into the master plan.
But I called and asked about this earlier, and it is not something that we are required to build to.
Correct.
Because it's called one of the compliance options.
Yes, but it's not a compliance option that we're pursuing at this point. Okay. For that reason, it really becomes just academic to inform the state as they contemplate kind of the impacts of middle housing and things like that. But really, what's being put into master plan is this 1,587 units, which I believe is consistent with discussions we've had with council previously. With that, let's go ahead and get into it. Just big picture, as you look through this infrastructure information, transportation and infrastructure information, it is building, as a lot of this master planning effort is, on the preliminary work done during the Frog Pond Area Plan back in 2015. There was infrastructure planning done as part of that, especially when you start talking about transportation. There was some things put into model, kind of roughly what is that going to look like and how it's going to anticipate. So that's a follow-up to that work. The other really purpose and outcome we're looking at is a list of projects for cost estimating to put into the master plan, see what infrastructure projects are going to need to be built. So with that, let me pass it off to Jenna, and I'll go ahead and advance slides. Jenna, you can either come here or over.
Here's a question.
Can I just ask a question? I forgot back there on your numbers on the 1,500 versus the 1,800, 1,500 something. Yeah. My recollection with Villebois was that we had a number that was our target dwelling unit number that we needed to carry the infrastructure. And so that was the number that if we had to change something, shift the stormwater retention things or the parks or add a park or whatever, then we had to make up the dwelling units somewhere else in order to carry the infrastructure for the whole thing. I can't remember the number, but it was 3,000 something.
Well, it was, so the state required 2,300. I think it was like 2,400. We ended up with like 2,600. Yeah.
Is that what the 1587 relates to?
No, it's not necessary. I mean, we will take that in consideration as we do the infrastructure financing and like the calculation of fees and things like that, which is work still to come going into the next year. But that is really just reflects what has been expressed through the community process of what the different urban form will be through the different areas and how much developable land there is.
Right.
That's really, that's a capacity number.
Right. And that was true with Villebois also, yeah. But there was also that carrying number.
Yeah, so without going down this too much, really there will be a minimum unit count.
Right.
As we anticipate in the draft, that's what it is, a minimum unit count, which is close around this 1,500.
Okay.
Which would be the minimum to carry that infrastructure cost.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that's all I need.
And so with that, I'll pass it off to Jenna.
Thanks, Dan. Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Jenna Bogert. I'm a transportation engineer with DKS Associates. And I'm here tonight to share the general findings of the transportation analysis, as well as walk through that list of recommended transportation projects. First, though, I thought I'd start with kind of a process that we go through for the transportation analysis, just to provide some context to kind of how we get to that final goal, which is that list of projects. And so first we start out by analyzing existing conditions. We collect traffic count data from 2022, so current year. We identify study intersections in the city that we would estimate will be impacted potentially by the development. And we look at the 2022 vehicle conditions and document that. Next, we look at that Wilsonville travel demand model, which has 2040 traffic volumes in it, and that's what we use to run our transportation analysis for 2040. The Wilsonville travel demand model is a sub-area cut of the Metro travel demand model, so it has the same land use information that Metro has, and there were some existing housing densities and job assumptions for the east and south neighborhoods in that model currently. And so we pulled those volumes from that 2040 model and called those our baseline conditions. But upon further inspection, we found that the housing was not quite as dense as it should be to represent the 1,800 unit count that Dan was talking about. And so we made some adjustments to that so it was more representative of that number, and then reproduced 2040 traffic volumes at those study intersections. And so we have those two scenarios that we then analyzed and compared to city operating standards. So your city LOS standard is LOSD, level of service D. And so using that standard, we can identify intersections that are not meeting that standard, and from there identify projects that would provide the capacity that's needed for the housing development. And so on the next slide, we have the summary of the traffic operations that we evaluated, and a list of the map there of the study intersections that we took a look at. So that includes the two I-5 interchanges up at Ellington Road and down at Wilsonville Road. It also includes those gateways to the east neighborhood and south neighborhood along Stafford and Advance. And so under existing 2022 conditions, we found that all those intersections actually met city level service standards, except for the Stafford Road 65th Avenue intersection, which is actually under Clackamas County jurisdiction. And really we've included that in this list of intersections, even though it's not city, because it is a key gateway into that Frog Pond area, and definitely lots of regional traffic comes and goes through there. And so we've included it so that we can kind of keep tabs on it and help inform the county on what to expect there in 2040 with the Frog Pond development. So under 2040 conditions, again, all the study intersections were meeting city standards except for those three. They're shown in red along Stafford Road. So those intersections would be Colley Road, Frog Pond Lane, and Brisbane Street. And we analyzed those as what they are today, which are stop controlled intersections. So we didn't assume any kind of improvements like traffic signals or roundabouts there as our baseline assumption, just so that we could have a good idea of what is really needed there at a minimum. Next slide. And before I kind of talk through those three intersections, I'll note that in that 2015 Frog Pond Area Plan report that we did, 7 years ago or so, it had saw the same findings. We had failures at these intersections. There were recommendations for traffic control improvements at these intersections, and really these improvements this round are more refined. So we've, now we have more information about the desired land use and where land uses will be located in the neighborhoods, and that helped inform why we chose these specific traffic control upgrades. And so these are really very similar and consistent with what you've seen before in 2015. So starting there at the north end, Colley Road and Stafford Road intersection, we recommend a single lane roundabout to provide the additional capacity needed for the growth. Moving down to Frog Pond Lane and Stafford Road, we recommend a median across the center lane there along Stafford Road, such that some of the minor street movements would be restricted. So you wouldn't be permitted to take a left turn out of Frog Pond Lane onto Stafford Road, and you wouldn't be able to cross Stafford Road from the east to west or west to east neighborhood. But you could make a left turn from Stafford Road into the neighborhoods. So just those minor street movements would be restricted. Moving down to Brisbane Street, similarly, a single lane roundabout is what's recommended at that location to provide that additional capacity. And then although it did not fail to meet city standards at Advance Road and 60th Avenue, at that intersection, we're recommending a single lane roundabout for safety. Roundabouts, we know, provide slower vehicle speeds. They reduce fatal and injury crashes significantly. And so that's a huge safety benefit. And really another benefit of a single lane roundabout there would be serving as a transition point between kind of those rural land uses on east end of Advance Road and then the neighborhood uses that you'll start to see near the west end of Advance Road. So as a driver, you hit that roundabout and kind of feel that transition into the neighborhoods and people walking and biking as opposed to where you had been on Advance Road. Next slide. So those are the intersection improvements for our vehicles. For ped and bikes, we've also identified some needs in the area. Starting on this map, kind of I'll work my way around 1 through 8. There at location 1 is Colley Road and Stafford Road intersection, so that single lane roundabout would have standard pedestrian crossings on all 4 legs. Those crossings would be 2-stage, so there'd be a median, which allows people to kind of shelter halfway through the crosswalk. And then down at location number 2, you would have that Frog Pond Lane turn restrictions with medians, but we would make a cut so that pedestrians could still have a full crosswalk across that Stafford Road and maintain that pedestrian connectivity between the 2 neighborhoods. Location 3, again, a single lane roundabout, so we would also still have those standard pedestrian crossings, standard signage, 2-stage crossings. And then moving down to Advance Road, we would have a recommendation for a school crosswalk there at the entrance to the middle school. That would also could be a candidate for a rectangular rapid flashing beacon if that was something that was desired for just additional comfort level by pedestrians crossing there, which would mostly be school-age children. And then a little bit to the east there at location 5, we would recommend a mid-block crossing, anticipating that a lot of the neighborhoods and people living in the north side of Advance Road wanting to access that community park to the south, and that kind of being a funnel point for people wanting to use that area. And then lastly at location 6, we'd have another single lane roundabout, again with standard crosswalks and 2-stage crossings. That, again, could also be a candidate for our RFB if we felt like that was a location where we'd anticipate a lot of ped volume or more vulnerable pedestrian and bicycle users. So that is all the intersection improvements. I'll also mention the last 2 there on 7 and 8. So 7 is Stafford Road bike facilities, and that would be located on the east side of Stafford Road. We would recommend something like a multi-use path or a cycle track, protected bike lanes. Really any of those options would benefit greatly to pedestrian connectivity and ease of movement through that area. And then along Advance Road, again, a multi-use path, a cycle track, or protected bike lanes would be great. What we really would want to see there, though, is whatever the Beckman Road project settles on for a design, we would want to match that cross-section and kind of carry that continuity across Stafford Road onto Advance Road and match those facilities.
Thanks. I see we have a question or comment from Councillor West.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thanks for your presentation. So I want to make sure I understand number 2.
Sure.
That would be going, let's see here, east to west. Is that what we're looking at? Like that infrastructure goes east to west?
Yes.
And so that what's on the other side? Is there a road? Where are they walking to? Is that it's not another neighborhood, is it? Or is it a?
On the west end?
On the west end, yeah. So you see the neighborhood and it would be leaving and crossing over. What is that? What, is there going to be sidewalks around the other side? Is that like like pedestrian pathways on either side of that road that don't exist now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay. And then my other concern is, I know this whole council and everybody in this room has always been concerned about the 65th and Ellington intersection. So we all know the backup is already really severe, right? And then it's already dangerous. Do we have any idea that is this going to get significantly worse with the development of these properties? Are we going to see even further backup that and an increased danger in that area? Is there any advocacy we're working on now to try to help mitigate that? I know it is a county and metro issue specifically with the boundary and stuff, but like, do we have any? I don't know. Maybe this isn't the right question for that, but how is this going to impact this infrastructure too? That reality just down the road.
Do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Councilor Westham, Scott Manser with DKS. Jen and I work together, and I was just going to respond. So just so you know, the city is actually underway in designing a temporary traffic signal at that location. And really that's in advance of the Beckman project, because once that's closed, you'll be sending a lot more traffic through that intersection. So we're working through the design process now. We've been coordinating with Clackamas County, and that will be designed. Right now, the schedule is to build that temporary signal there in, I believe, September of 2023.
Just to clarify, when you say that location? Yeah.
I'm sorry, 65th and Stafford.
Oh, right there at
65th and Stafford.
Yeah, 65th and Stafford.
Okay.
Yes. Clackamas County's long-term plan is for a roundabout at that location, and they, talking to the county engineer, they've been putting in applications to receive funding for the future roundabout. And once they have that funding, they plan to build a roundabout. But there's going to be a lot of challenges with environmental issues at that location.
Elevation's wonky. And
yes, exactly. So they're going to be doing an alternatives analysis to make sure their TSP says a roundabout, but they may end up going with a signal if they can't build, if there's too many environmental impacts to build the roundabout.
So I have a related question. I was just talking to Mark Ottenat about this a week or so ago, and remind me, because isn't that part of that area also in Washington County?
Yes, so the Ellington 65th intersection is Washington County, and the Stafford 65th intersection is Clackamas County. So, when I said Clackamas County, Washington County also has been in all of our conversations and the discussion for those future.
And Mark tells me there's a metro boundary, like everybody's in this dangerous intersection. There's like a metro boundary right there too.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the metro boundary, but I do know that the different jurisdictional boundaries that we've been working with.
Councilor Lee.
Just to clarify, Metro doesn't do roads. That's all county. It's one county or the other county, or else it's a city, or else it's a state. Metro doesn't do roads.
And part of the funding for that, there's going to be a big struggle for funding there, but part of that would be the vehicle registration fee that the county can access.
Correct.
But I'm sure that's not nearly enough.
Yes. Yeah, the interim, even just building the temporary signal is going to be, because of the curves of Stafford Road, we're going to have some advanced flashers warning people of the signal. So there's just a lot of challenges with that intersection, but there is some relief coming with the temporary signal.
And if it's okay, Mayor, I mean, that's great. If there's more questions, I'd recommend we go through the pipeline.
Okay.
The water and sewer infrastructure pieces, and then we can come back for questions.
Okay.
So with that, I'll hand it over to Mike Carr with Murray Smith.
Thanks, Dan. And good to see you this evening, Dan, and council members. Appreciate the opportunity to talk about Frog Pond East and South here as far as water and sewer infrastructure. To start with the water system here, you can see this, basically this layout here. So the scope of our water system analysis was just the distribution system and the storage system. We didn't talk about water supply, but water supply is understood to be adequate. So we'll just keep this to water distribution and storage. Really, from a high level perspective, the water system, distribution system for the city that's going to feed Frog Pond East and South is adequate. Really what we need are, we have to extend the 12-inch backbone system through Frog Pond East and South, and that's what these thicker blue lines are. demonstrating the network there of what we're proposing, which is in line with the water system master plan that was done previously. There will be, and these will follow the street network, by the way, for the most part. Now, there are 2 connections to the existing water system that were recommended in the water system master plan, and we do believe are important in terms of establishing or extending the redundancy and the resiliency of the water system for these additional neighborhoods. And that's a connection up at the Canyon Creek area, that subdivision there, to connect to that water line system, and then another one down Frog Pond South down at the Beckman Creek, the primary school. And both of those require ravine crossings, one of Beckman Creek and Meridian Creek. But both of them really extend, again, the resiliency of the water system to provide another connection, because most of pretty much the water feed that's going to be feeding Frog Pond East and South comes down Beckman Road and that 12-inch water line. There is a connection down from Wilsonville Road, but to establish this resiliency and we think those connections. Getting to storage, generally in 2012 in the master plan, there was understood to be an overall system deficiency in water storage. The addition of Frog Pond East and South exacerbates that a little bit, but they were accounted for in that master plan. There is a CIP project, and my understanding is that will be getting underway here next year, and it's scheduled to be construction completed by 2025. So all in all, it's a relatively straightforward water CIP for Frog Pond East and South. So moving on to wastewater. Again, our scope of the analysis here was the collection system in the local Frog Pond East and South area, as well as conveyance downstream. Wastewater treatment it was not really considered in this, but is taken care of in other studies. So regarding the local service in Frog Pond East and South, they're really somewhat separate based on topography. So in Frog Pond East, that one's really divided up into 2 areas. The southeast neighborhood, essentially, the one that borders Advance and Stafford at that intersection, can flow by gravity into the existing collection system. But there are 3 other areas in Frog Pond East at the far eastern end of Advance Road, and then on the other side of the BPA on Colley Road, where 3 small lift stations will be required to serve those neighborhoods. And each one will serve its own independent neighborhood, but there really isn't an opportunity to flow by gravity to the existing collection system. In Frog Pond South, the topography again is going from, the grade goes from north to south toward the Willamette River, and so that neighborhood really can't be served by gravity to the existing system in Advance Road, and so we're proposing a separate lift station that will pretty much serve that whole area, and that'll be 1 station. It'll also be relatively small, and it will pump back up to Advance Road. Other than that, then we've got as far as off-site CIP projects, the conveyance system that goes downstream of Frog Pond, 2 major pieces of infrastructure that still need to be built. One is the Beckman Road trunk sewer, and that is basically underway in design right now, and it's scheduled to be completed in 2024 in conjunction with the road and the bridge project. And then downstream of that is the Beckman Creek Interceptor sewer, which goes from Beckman Road down to Memorial Park to the pump station down there. And that one's going to be getting going here in the next should be month or 2, and again is going to be completed by 2025. And then the pump station in Memorial Park was just completed. It was a necessary upgrade that needed to happen, and that was put online in 2022 earlier this year. So that's pretty much a high-level view of water and wastewater. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
So I'll give it back to you, Mayor. Any Question and comments about infrastructure and transportation?
Council President Akkerval?
Thank you. I do have one question about that roundabout that's proposed for the 60th in Advance, which you explained in your presentation how that can really serve as kind of a traffic calming feature as people are entering into Frog Pond. You know, when we're looking at the maps, yeah, that's a great map. Let's look at that one. And we see that roundabout in the bottom kind of right corner of the map. But I also notice we're already maybe 2 or 3 blocks into the Frog Pond neighborhood when that roundabout happens. So I'm assuming there's probably other traffic calming features that are going to happen earlier on, or do we need something specific? We don't want people to blast through those first 3 blocks of Frog Pond before they approach the roundabout.
Yes, there would definitely be some different design treatments. I mean, it would be great if we could move the roundabout, but the 60th is kind of the desired point with connection to the school. So it's in the right location, but we would likely have some medians and other things to narrow the traffic, because what Jenna was saying is that it creates a gateway and it really changes. You realize that you're in a different setting.
Exactly.
And so having medians and probably some speed feedback signs that are measuring people's speeds and telling them, here's what your speed is, here's what you're traveling. We would have those treatments probably further to the east to set the stage.
And I would add another part of it is providing bike and pedestrian facilities that don't require crossing the street, or because it'd be a separate trail there on the north side of Advance for bikes and peds. So you're really so there's a buffer, you're really not interacting with that traffic on that part of Advance as much as further west as a bike or ped.
You're saying like for that segment of Advance that's east of this proposed roundabout, there will be a separation.
There's separation, not opportunity, as many opportunities for conflicts with bikes and peds and vehicles.
Yeah, but I think, you know, sometimes we hear about sounds from louder traffic, or, you know, just driving past somebody's home or near their yard or their whatever, and concerns like that. So it sounds like bulb out, median, something like this will kind of signal that we've got lower speeds in that entire area. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Lehan.
Yes, do we have a cross-section here, or we aren't to that stage yet?
We have some draft ones that are in the master plan that I can share with you separately. We did not include them in this presentation.
Because
they will be further developed into next year. We have some initial sketches of what we think they'll look at.
You mean topographical?
You know, when they do a cross-section, and here's the 2 little people, and there's the car, and, you know, trees.
Elevation.
Like that. I'll draw a picture for you. Well, it's hard to envision, and I have some of those same kind of concerns that Councilor Akkerval had, and that's the goals, it seems here, should be not just making a safe realm for pedestrians and bicyclists and whatever, but also making it unfriendly to trucks. And that's what we did in the rest of Wilsonville Road coming in south of Beckman, coming in front of the high school, and et cetera. You know, that's a very truck unfriendly section of road because it has trees, and we in the median, which between Meadows and Landover, remember, we went back later. They weren't included originally for a variety of reasons, but we couldn't afford it. And I think we put them in with urban renewal or something, but we put in that whole additional median because the neighborhood wanted it. But in front of the high school and on down to Rose Lane, we have median full of trees. We have trees at the curb, and the sidewalk is offset. So it's a very narrow field for trucks in there because there's trees on both sides. And the pedestrians are protected on the other side of the trees, and the street trees. And it was a big factor when we were up against the whole industrial lands thing. It was the case that we made for why to not make Frog Pond an industrial area was we had never planned for trucks coming down Wilsonville Road into past the library, et cetera. And instead we had built 95th and Kinsman to be 100% truck friendly, no trees in the median, curb tight sidewalks, all the rest. Very wide open view, an endless middle lane, turn lane in the middle. It was all built for trucks, and the east side was intentionally not. And it was a big deciding factor for Metro and the region to say, maybe this isn't such a good place for industrial because it brings trucks, and they didn't build it for trucks. So there's two goals here, it would seem to me, in the transportation scheme, and one is so that it isn't a cut-through, which it easily can be when 205 is not working and trucks want to cut through to I-5 and come in on Wilsonville Road. So we don't want to encourage it as a truck cut through, especially if, of course, if 65th becomes a roundabout, then they aren't going to want to come that way anyway. But if that were otherwise an improved intersection, then they're going to be wanting to cut through there more when 205 isn't working. So anyway, it just seems like we need to, that cross-section is a critical part of how this plan all comes together, so that it is very friendly for pedestrians and bicyclists and those slower speeds, and it's not built for trucks, because we built the north-south on the other side for trucks, and because there will continue to be a push for industrial north of Frog Pond, my guess. And that will be trucks coming that way.
Any plans to that regard?
Yeah, and I guess, Councilor Land, I was involved in the project with Nancy to the south, and I think we even widened some of the existing medians and added more.
Trees in the median?
Yes, yep. Mm-hmm. And so, that's really kind of our vision for this area, and with the roundabouts versus signals, we'd really like to see the roundabouts. Trucks can still use them, but they have to go very slow, and trucks don't like to use them. And so we really are trying to make this kind of more of a neighborhood friendly, making it, connections between neighborhoods across Stafford, and we're trying to make this as neighborhood friendly and discourage truck cut through traffic.
So part of that is where we place the trees, and that's what you see on a cross section, whether the trees are by the road or the sidewalk is by the road, and part of that is the trees in the median, but anyway, that's the piece that's missing, but I guess we'll get a feel for that later.
Yeah, one of the benefits of roundabout too is you don't need left turn pockets, right? Like where you need signals, and so you can have the full median between the roundabouts.
Right, exactly.
Thank you. I'm going to now ask Councilor Linville and then Councilor West.
Okay, thank you. In the draft, there is a mention about the Grange building, and there is there is a description. No, in the sentence, it talks about a full access roundabout versus a limited access roundabout. And in your language, in your presentation, you talked about a single roundabout, and I'm wondering, how does that mesh with full access and limited access?
Yeah, I think it had to do with the right-of-way, right? And with the turn restrictions at Frog Pond Lane, you don't need as much right-of-way there, right? You can maintain that narrow 3-lane cross-section. You don't have any curbs for signal poles or widening for that roundabout circle, so you don't have, you minimize your impacts to that Grange building. Whereas if you put a roundabout or a traffic signal at that intersection, now you're starting to encroach on that Grange building, and it needs more space to build those two improvements. So that was the discussion in the report about kind of the trade-offs between right-of-way, between those options.
So are we not putting any full, what's a full access versus a limited access roundabout?
Well, I think with the single lane roundabout, we're able to design it in a way because you don't have, it's rural to the north. And so as we're able to lay out that single lane roundabout, we can do it without impacting the Grange. If we start going to a much larger, more urban roundabout and facilities to the north, at that point, you may have some impacts.
And Scott, we may want to clarify, I just want to make sure I'm understanding you correctly, Counselor, is you're talking Frog Pond Lane in Stafford, which is not a roundabout, it's an intersection, but it is a partial access intersection, not a full access. So essentially, all that means is a vehicle cannot travel straight across Stafford Road.
And
It's turning lane.
Right.
And it,
So there prevents,
yeah. And it wouldn't be a roundabout, it would be an intersection with stop signs and a median, yeah.
Okay. So in in table number 4, where it talks about the anticipated build intersection operations, the highlighted area that is Stafford and Brisbane, Stafford and Frog Pond Lane, and Stafford and Cayley.
Collie.
It's Collie.
just remember it rhymes with Polly.
Yeah, so those already at peak hour do exceed our level of service performance standard, correct?
Prior to the roundabouts and the improvements that we're talking about.
Okay, and so when this was put together, it was as if we don't do anything, this is what it's going to look like.
Correct.
Okay, great. And then I just wondered about the buses on the roundabouts, because obviously this is going to be needed to be served by both city buses and school buses. And is there an impact for the buses on the roundabouts?
They'll be designed for trucks to use. A lot of times with the buses, they may have to go a little bit slower, but they can make the maneuvers within the roundabout safely. And yeah, they won't be prohibited from using these.
Okay. And then at some point, can we have, as a council, have a discussion about why our level of service performance standard is D versus something at a lower level than that? It doesn't need to obviously be today, and it doesn't.
Money.
It's money. Okay. All right.
And also D, as I've had this discussion, it's not as bad as getting a D in math class. It's not the same thing.
But it's the second to the last, and traffic is generally the major concern that most people in the city have.
And it's only D during certain portions of the day. It's PM. Is it PM?
Peak, yes, 4 to 6 p.m.
It's only,
Yeah.
it's only certain times.
Yeah.
And the trade-off, besides the money, is the amount of pavement you want to lay down.
Yeah.
Because most neighborhoods would prefer to not have a 2 or 3 lane thing running through there.
Sure. And the more
wanna-
lanes we build, the more expensive housing is, and you just can't have everything.
Can't get there.
Impacts.
So Counselor West, and we're still moving along to 45 minutes more of session, but we're doing well.
Okay. So, I live on the backside of Allowable, right where Graham's Ferry is, and I just get this impression as we're on the edge of the urban growth boundary on this side of the city. I live on the edge on the other side of the city. So I have some questions that Council President Ackerval already alluded to. Back behind my house on Graham's Ferry, we have one roundabout on Barber, then there's this a massive stretch with no roundabout. This is like 3 blocks or so, but we do have cars racing. I mean, we had a police car chase somebody and go through our neighborhood's brick wall entrance to Allowable. We've had, we have like Too Fast, Too Furious, honestly, and that's funny, but that's how it feels because you're sitting in your backyard next to your koi pond and it's like boom, boom, all the way through. So I guess I always wish could we put, I know it's a county road, but the reason so I think it's relevant here. Are things like speed bumps commonly used to slow between longer stretches if we can't do another roundabout? Is this also going to help the city's traffic flow if we get really bad diversion from tolling from 205 when that becomes worse and people are going to look to cut through here and we're going to see really bad diversions? So some of this infrastructure can inherently help against that too.
Yeah, so I'll first answer your question about, Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue from the emergency services side does not allow speed humps on arterials and collectors unless they're fire friendly. They have basically the kind of cutouts. And typically the city is kind of taken design. Because of the emergency services and the response times, the impacts to that has tried to stay away from. But there are a lot of other design aspects that you can implement to slow traffic. I mean, from somebody that's trying to get away from the police, there's not a lot you can do to design for that situation, but you can narrow the roads, the medians, and do what we can to kind of create that narrowing effect and also have, education from speed feedback signs and other design aspects to help keep the speeds low. And I think rural roads where there's not any of those design aspects, there's not really anything discouraging people from driving fast, and that's why we want to implement some of those design aspects to the infrastructure to slow traffic.
Okay, thank you. Good question. And one more, we have Council President Ackerval.
Okay, I'll try to have this be quick, but maybe there's a quick answer like money, right?
Right.
For the level of service D. Since we have staff here, DKS here, when we're looking at the table 2, I think in table 4, and we have the columns for the PM peak hour, and we have the level of service, and we can make these comparisons. Yes. I was actually surprised that there wasn't a greater change between table 2 and table 4 on some of the instances. However, in the appendix, we have all of the counts, like all the detailed counts, right? And here you get everything split out by what is it, 5-minute increments? Yes. Right? We get all the counts split out by 5-minute increments for the PM peak, and we're still looking though from 4 to 6, and that is my question, because it feels like traffic skews earlier than 4, especially in those intersections that are close to I-5, because I-5 traffic is, it's full and underway by 4 p.m. And I know that this is a standard that isn't just unique to City of Wilsonville, but you work with many cities. Can you kind of give us a little info on why are we looking at 4 to 6 when we know traffic is happening earlier? By 6, it's pretty good in most places,
We've done a lot of data collection, and even a couple years ago, we were looking at 3 to 6 p.m.
Yeah.
Just to say, hey, and it was, it's one of the things you start seeing is as I-5 gets to capacity, people start changing their habits. I'm like, oh, well, I'm going to leave for work a little bit earlier. So we call it peak spreading, and so you end up seeing that spread out. And so, but still within Wilsonville, most of the time your 8 to 5 or your jobs are still that peak is still going to happen the highest hour between 4 and 6 p.m. But we do a lot of 24-hour data counts, and we haven't really seen anything that I would recommend to you as mayor and council that you would want to change that 4 to 6 p.m. But things are starting to creep up in that kind of outside of that 4 to 6 p.m. because of capacity, and people just, if you don't want to sit in traffic, then you can leave a little earlier if you have that flexibility.
Yeah, I was noticing several of the tables at the 4 o'clock were already in the red lines versus the darker gray lines, which is highlighting the most intense periods, and that's already happening at 4. So I'm just curious what's happening on the other side of 4, and if that's helpful information for us instead of only defining 4 to 6.
Yeah. Are you familiar with the city's performance monitoring report?
No.
Okay, so we've been doing every 2 years on behalf of the Public Works and Engineering, have been monitoring, and we count about 14 locations where we're collecting 24-hour data, peak hour data, and we're really trying to help inform the city of how things are changing. Because what we found like 10 years ago, a change in Sherwood and Washington County ended up adding a bunch more traffic to the I-5 Ellington interchange. And so we track every 2 years, we count, and we make recommendations to the city on how things are, here you're seeing a lot more growth in this side of the area. So, and we're actually going to be starting that process pretty soon, that we kind of look at the citywide traffic.
Okay.
So I think we'll probably be sharing with you probably in the next year some of our findings, and that'd be a great opportunity to ask some questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So I think if we've covered the main discussion we were looking for on this one.
Yes.
And we have more discussions we can have about freeways and county
We could talk
roads.
traffic all night, yeah.
And Dan is offering himself up if you want to talk about the housing issue, if you want individual briefings. We had talked about this via email. If council needs more on the design stuff, then you
Yeah, feel free to reach out. I will tell you, we can connect with the rest of the project team as well. If I'm not available, I do have limited availability the week of the 10th and the 17th.
So to add more background on the housing side of Frog Pound, east and west.
If you need it.
we will make sure you have the.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Okay.
So council can call Mr. Polly and set up a,
We will be back on the 17th to talk about, just confirm some of the residential policy as well as the commercial piece as well, just to check in with council on that prior to the rest of the upcoming dates on this slide. So
okay.
And those 2 historic houses, is that part of that housing?
The what?
The 2 historic houses in there?
Yeah, and I've spoken actually with Sparkle this week about her plans and the condition of the house, and but that is really, I can talk
don't
offline
we
about
hold
exactly
off
what
for
we're
next
talking about, but that's the broader housing policy that we're talking here.
Yeah, I just wanted to be sure that was in there. There's only 2 in there that I am aware of.
And you got the email on how we've been handling demolition stuff.
Yes.
so now, thank you, both of you, for this in-depth detail. And I think that closes that out, and we'll now move to item B on our pre-council work session, which is a review of the draft solid waste collection rate report for September 2022, introduced by Mr. Otnod.
Good evening, Mayor, members of City Council. Tonight we have Chris Bell, CPA of Bell & Associates, who will be joining us remotely. I think there he is on the screen right now. And I am Mark Otnett, Public and Government Affairs Director. Tonight at work session, we will be discussing the revised Asawa waste report. You received an updated revised version today, along with a memo from Republic Services, our solid waste provider, just regarding general issues that they see with the rate review process, and that we will be working with Republic Services on to clarify the process for next year. The 22 rate review process and results is composed of 3 main components: an annual cost report, which is the adjusted results for 2021, a set of projected results for 2022, and a rate recommendation for 2023. Republic Services has 3 lines of business: roll cart for residential customers, container for commercial businesses, and drop box for industrial business customers. You add up all 3 of these for the total or the composite revenue. Mr. Bell. How do you say, microphone? Chris, microphone?
There we go. I apologize. Every year, Republic Services submits an annual cost report of the prior year results. And this year, they submitted it in March for the prior year, 2021. And upon review of that report, we work with the individuals and the people who put this together for Republic Services. And this year's, 2021's adjusted results were just under 16%, which is comparable to the previous years and expected. So there was no surprises there. Next slide, please. But when we look at 2021, we're also looking at where we're at today this year and adjusting for known and in some cases unknown factors. We take those results from 2021, the line item results, and we either increase them or decrease them with known factors. In this case, the city had a slight rate adjustment effective January 1st, 2022. We took those rate adjustments into account. We also see some things that are coming on for 2022 and could possibly impact 2023, and one of them is recycling processing. Last year we had a great year. It finished up very, very strong, but we've lost those gains, and we're estimating between 50 and maybe 60 or 70%, depending on the way the year ends, as far as the increase in the processing costs. And that's attributed to the decreased value of the collected materials, the end product. Driver wages per the union contract is going to increase just under 3%. We expect a minimum administrative cost increase by 5%. Factors that are influenced by inflation, we use the CPI for the West Coast, and that is saying that we're expecting just under or just over 6.5% inflation. Fuel, the nice thing is while fuel costs are escalating at a pretty good rate for diesel, Republic Services uses compressed natural gas to fuel their collection fleet, and so we're anticipating a slight increase over the previous year of 10%. And in this year, as well as the upcoming years, we're expecting increases in solid waste disposal. We are anticipating approximately a 9% increase, and that's coming from 2 primary sources. One of them is Metro, the increase in fees and taxes assessed on solid waste, and the other are just increases for fuel and transportation and disposal and other costs associated with the handling of solid waste. So we take all of these assumptions, we plug them in, and then we anticipate, next slide please, we're expecting just under 10% rate of return for the current year for 2022, which is in line or which is in between the margin, the 8 to 12% target margin. So we're just under that. And keep in mind, like I said, we're taking everything that we can, that we anticipate is going to happen, is going to come in at 10%. In prior years, the one thing we don't take into consideration, which has been good to the city of Wilsonville, is increase in volume, and that means additional people moving to Wilsonville, businesses opening up. So this snapshot is kind of the worst case scenario for the city of Wilsonville. Although, and I expect it to be a little bit better than this is the worst case. And with that range, we're, because we're in that 8 to 12% operating range, the recommendation is to not adjust rates for the upcoming fiscal year.
And this next slide basically summarizes what Chris Bell just said, which is that the franchise allows a standard rate of return margin between 8 and 12% with a target of 10%. The projected 2022 results are within range and nearly at the at-target rate of return of 9.8% margin. Therefore, no rate modifications are recommended for next year, and that we maintain the current rates as they are. I'll give two quick additional items regarding the special recycling services. You may recall there was a fluorescent tube battery recycling project that we authorized a couple years ago. That was suspended due to COVID, and it's been restarted this past year by our new AcDev manager. It's a great outreach tool to approach local companies. Hi, I'm from the government, and I'm here to help you. And the other is the special recycling services for the Metro Commercial Food Waste Program. Phase 1 for large generators was postponed 2 years. It was planned to start in March of 2020. It was delayed to 2022. Phases 2 and 3 for the smaller producers will start next year. The county sustainability staff are in the lead with our city AcDev manager assisting. And that is it for our solid waste collection rate review, which we would bring back to you for your November 7 meeting via resolution number 3004 for adoption.
Thank you. I think Councilor Linville.
Thank you. Thank you both for the presentation. I'm asking to jog your memory. When the decision was made to decrease the rate, which I believe was last year.
Correct.
What was the anticipated margin, income revenue margin for that year?
Mayor, Councilor Linville, good question. I will turn to our rate review consultant to jog his memory.
Rather than jog my memory, I'll just pull up the information from last year.
Okay.
And tell you what the number was. The projected rate of return without any adjustments to the rates was anticipated to be 18%.
Okay.
And so we dropped that down. We were trying, there's a level of precision that I always hope is there, but we were anticipating just around 12% with the rate adjustment.
And would that number then, Chris, correspond to the 15.8% that is in Table 1 of the document?
Yes. Yeah, the Table 1, that is the 2021 adjusted. And we were anticipating, and keep in mind, when we were looking at, we weren't modeling 2022 numbers. We were modeling what was going to happen in 2021. Mm-hmm. So we've got kind of a year lag. So we will know on March 15th when the annual report is submitted by Republic Services how we actually did for the current year.
And then the only other question that I had was, I think one of the other programs that was suspended as a result of COVID was the large item senior pickup. And are there any plans to reinstate that program?
Mayor, Councilor Linville, good question. What we found was that that was actually a limited duration program for a set time period. There was a slight delay, but then it was continued, and that program ran its course. So if down the road, if the council wanted to reenact that program, we could look and discuss with Republic Services what that would look like. However, However, it didn't have the utilization that we thought it would, and occasionally we would find sometimes businesses seeking like an apartment complex looking to...
Unload.
Yes, correct.
Right.
I will say one thing, Republic Services has done such a great job managing their business in the context of a growing market. So because Wilsonville keeps adding more and more customers, the company, Republic Services, has no cost of acquisition for these new customers. Maybe occasionally they might need to buy a new piece of equipment. Otherwise, they just keep adding new customers, and to drive the truck another 20 feet is not that expensive, and yet it yields a good amount of revenue. If Wilsonville were not a growing community, we might have a different situation where cost surpassed revenue.
Great. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I have a question, just ask for a reference point on the food waste collection. Now, City of Wilsonville produced those kitchen collector cans with the nice logo on them, and I've heard, and I think we got 500, and they were all taken by people, and I heard somebody in another city say, oh, that must be pretty hard for people to participate in because they have to buy a compost bin and they have to do all this work. But when you remind them they don't have to go that far because we have the yard waste collectors that you just pop it in there once a week and Republic Services takes it away. Have we done, I think it'd be good to do another reminder of how easy that is so that more people could join into that. I just went to a meeting with cities in Clackamas County hearing from Metro about these things that we just don't like to talk about is the cost of driving garbage around to actually get it out of our neighborhoods and out of our site. And it's extremely hard to find space for all this garbage and expensive. And so the more that people can do to, not generate so much garbage will save us all money in the long run. So those little food things do create something of a dent. Is there any thought to ramping up the awareness of that?
I'm sure that we can speak to our communications and marketing manager and suggest having some more promotion in the
It's actually
BFF.
pretty easy.
Yes.
Yeah, and I might suggest too that we are getting close to the rounds for community enhancement projects. And that might, given that that was a very popular program, might be something to look at again.
Very good.
Thank you. Anyone else? Council President Ockerville? This is yours.
That's
I don't
me.
know.
That's good.
I thought that was Linville.
Thank you, Your Honor. I know, I'm concerned, like many people, that we're facing some pretty significant economic downturns, and sometimes these fantastic programs are expensive, and they provide a service, but sometimes it also like we don't always get the utilization, or it doesn't always work out exactly we have planned, as you just mentioned, right, Mark? So is there anything that we're currently that we have on the slate now that should be looked at if it's nice to have but not a necessity? And then my other question is, do we truly, are we sure we have a good enough buffer based on kind of the economic outlook on inflationary costs and other things that are down the pike to make sure that this is I just want to be, you said you did say that the expenses were considered and it was a conservative number, but I'm wondering what other measures we might have taken to really make sure we have that buffer to be based on the economic conditions that we're facing.
Mayor, Councilor West, on the first question, I don't think we have any additional services not being utilized. There is actually some discussion of potentially having a battery separation program that's done in some places in Oregon and instituting that here. There's been some discussion of potential additional recycling services. You may have heard there's been some issues with a company called Ridwell in Washington County. We're not in their target market. We have had discussions with Republic Services. They are looking into the idea of offering additional recycling services that would be at a separate upcharge, I believe. And in terms of your second question, I'll have to look to Chris Bell perhaps for some guidance on that.
Yeah, what we did is, again, like I was saying, we're trying to throw every expense that we could to see what the overall impact would be. And we went back and forth with representatives from Republic Services to make sure that, the rates and, the levels of inflation were adjusted. You can see by the memo that Jason submitted in your council package that we did adjust those issues that he did raise.
Okay, well, thank you very much. We will keep trying to keep the cost down and the volume.
May I just ask one question?
Councilor Linville.
Do we have residential styrofoam?
No, all styrofoam. The styrofoam station was not working well, great deal of contamination, quite a few problems, and so that was one of the programs that we discontinued.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate your report, and it looks like we're ready to move on to our last report, which is local discharge limits development with our Public Works Department.
Thank you so much for your help. Good evening, Mayor Fitzgerald and council members. I'm Steve Gehring. I'm the Industrial Pretreatment Coordinator for the City of Wilsonville, and I'm with Delora Kerber, our Public Works Director, today. I would like to talk to you about the local limits development that is shown in our resolution for number 2994. Why do we need to update our local limits? In September of 2020, Oregon DEQ, Department of Environmental Quality, renewed the city's permit that allows our wastewater treatment plant to discharge effluent into the Willamette River. Since it had been since 2004, since our last local limits update, part of renewing our permit was a condition to evaluate our local limits and update them if necessary. So what are local limits? Local limits are a quantified list of pollutants of concern such as arsenic, cyanide, lead, mercury, which have the potential to pass through the wastewater treatment plant into the river, a most valuable resource. How are local limits used? Local limits are used to regulate the industries that discharge non-domestic wastewater into the city's sewer collection system. And what industries are regulated by local limits? As you can see, we have 8 industries in the city that are currently regulated by local limits. They have a wastewater discharge permit that is issued by the city. Some industries, such as the bottling plant and the state-operated high-security gated community at the north end of town, they discharge at least 25,000 gallons of wastewater per day, where their pollutant of concern is pH. Other industries produce finished metal products such as medical devices and thermal imaging equipment, where metals in the wastewater would be the pollutant of concern. So how do we develop these local limits? First, you have to determine what the pollutants of concern are that come into the wastewater treatment plant and use a technical evaluation You can't just create these numbers by a simple roll of the dice or the pick out of a hat. You have to get all the data together in order to best know what those limits will be on those pollutants of concern. So wastewater was sampled for a laundry list of potential and site-specific pollutants. These samples were performed at the wastewater treatment plant at the influent, the effluent, and the biosolids that are removed from the plant. And it was also done at the residential and commercial areas throughout in the city. Most pollutants that were sampled for were below a detectable limit, which means that laboratory analysis can only get down to the smallest portion, and those items that were below that detectable limit show up in the analysis as a non-detect. The pollutants that were detected at levels that caused concern were determined to be the pollutants of concern. There were also some other items that were considered when determining what the levels would be on the pollutants of concern, which we looked at the efficiency of how well the wastewater treatment plant removes the pollutants. And it looked at major upgrades, such as those done at the wastewater treatment plant back in 2014, such as the mixing zone, which is the area around the diffuser pipe in the river that releases wastewater effluent into the river. So now we know what the pollutants are through all the data that was collected through the sampling. They knew how well the plant was at removing those pollutants. And they also looked at the limitations that were created by our actual permit that was issued to us by the state. And it looked at the limitations created by the Willamette River water limitations and standards. All that information was put together, and it was used to determine what's called the maximum allowable headworks load at the plant. This is what can safely come into the plant without being passed through into the river. Of that amount, it had to be determined how much could be given to industries, such as those that we had seen earlier, like the bottling plant and whatnot. So we had to decide how to divvy up that portion of the plant to industries. One of those was a 10% reserve, which is basically you would take everything that could be given to industries, you take away 10% as a safety net, and those 8 business industries would be given that whole 90%. It doesn't take into account the new industries that may come into the city, such as through the Basalt Creek and Coffee Creek future developments for industry. Our goal was to balance growth capacity and with the needs of existing users. And the EPA also recommended that you allow for growth in your numbers. Other ways we looked at it were 50% build out into those Basalt Creek, Coffee Creek, and those other areas. We also went all the way up to 100% build out with more food processors, more businesses with fats, oil, and grease. Out of all those various scenarios, and with keeping the goal to balance the growth capacity with the needs of existing users, we did go with the most conservative approach, which is going with a 100% build out plus additional food processors. You'll see here in the gray area on the screen, or the green on your computers, that the new limits that are proposed are less restrictive than the old local limits, the ones from 2004. You'll also note that on the right, there are federal categorical limits that are suggested. Those are not suggested, those are what are mandatory by the federal categorical limits for industries that do the metal fabrication. By using the most comprehensive, conservative approach and acknowledging efficiency at the wastewater treatment plant, the mixing zone, and the proposed local limits were created, which are less restrictive than the previous local limits. Industries still are held to the federal categorical limits, as you can see on the right-hand side. You also note that the total toxic organics are recommended to be removed from our local limits. Those are, for the categorical industries, are still held to that same number of the 2.13 milligrams per liter. Also, those are part of the no detect or not enough to, a high enough level for cause of concern in the pollutant screening. And so it was recommended by the data to remove those from our limits. To confirm these proposed limits would be acceptable, they were submitted to the Department of Environmental Quality, where they reviewed it and they gave us conditional approval. Since this modification is considered a significant change to the industrial pretreatment program, we provided a 35-day comment period with no comments received. I personally met with the other 8 industries to let them know about the proposed limits, and we received no negative comments. They were agreeable to those limits. So what are the next steps? It would be that council adopt resolution number 2994 for those local limits. The local limits would then be resubmitted to DEQ for final approval. And upon their final approval, that they would finally do a final approval on those local limits, and then we would need to start implementing those new limits in the industrial pretreatment program. The existing industries would not be immediately held to the new limits. Those new industries would be subject to them when their permits are either modified or renewed, and it would also go into effect for any new industries that come to town that would be permitted to discharge.
Thank you. Councilor Linville.
Mind you, I know nothing about this, so I'm going to ask you a question that you will have the answer for, and I do not. Out of all of the pollutants that are listed, and the one slide that you showed that showed the previous levels and then the new levels, there's not a significant, I mean, there is some change in those. The one that appears really different is the chromium. And is there a decimal point missing there? No. So why would that increase so much?
When you look at the data from the previous 2004, it was technically based then as well. And so the numbers that were calculated at that time were the 2.77 milligrams per liter. With the data that was received and given to the technical limits in this case, it is at the 205 milligrams per liter. However, if you look at the chromium for the federal categorical limit, it remains the same, the 2.77. Just keep in mind that the local limits are what are technically based. Those are the ones that are created by how efficient the plant is and what we can take into the plant and safely process without pass-through into the river. We can't make up a number because it feels better. These are the actual numbers and how they were computed. So with the limits that you are seeing here listed under new, those are the most restrictive by allowing for new build out of 100%.
Okay. What were the measurements that units that you used? Was it deciliter per liter or was it milliliter? What was it?
Milligrams
per liter.
Milligrams per liter for all of these?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Except for the pH, which is a unit.
Okay, yeah.
And so I have maybe the same question in a different way. So the reason the new limits are less restrictive relates to, are there some industry influences there to change those in addition to the way that and is it also tailored to the way that our particular plant functions?
Yes.
both things?
What's happening here is we're looking at what's in the background of the influence of the treatment plant, right? So how much is
So it's like prorated in a way?
Well, so
compared to
what
the past?
we're looking at is in all the millions of gallons that come to the wastewater plant, what are we picking up of any of these items in the background?
Okay.
That's the first one. And then the next one is, so that's what we know is coming into the plant. Then we look at the same constituents going out of the plant. And what's happening between is there's a removal. And so what they're recognizing is the efficiency of the plant's ability to remove is such that you could take on 205 milligrams per liter of cadmium, or I'm sorry, a chromium, and you would still meet your limits going out the back end pipe.
Thank you. That is very helpful. I just need to hear it a different way. Okay. And the federal limit, federal categorical limits, can you just run through again the difference? The daily maximum would be 0.11 milligrams per liter.
Yes.
For daily. And then 0.07 is the monthly average maximum. Is that per day during a month, or what are they saying there?
So typically a monthly average has to do is you're sampling more than once.
Okay.
Right, so you might be sampling 3 times a month, you average that, and as long as you're average, so you might have a day that's higher than 0.11 and a day that's lower than 0.11, and the average will get you to less than 0.07. But if every day you measure 0.12, you're over your limit.
Okay, so that helps with more protection, basically, with the average monthly.
Well, it gives more breathing room, if you will. Yes, I mean, because you could have just one day that happens to spike, but the rest of the days you're low. So it helps you kind of get that.
Council President Aukerbach.
Thank you. There we go. Okay. So I think that I'm understanding this. We're more efficient. We're better at removing the pollutants, right? So that is why the column for new is showing the increased values. However, if we look at the daily maximum or the monthly, I mean, either one, those are, in most cases, well, the daily maximum, they're higher than previous, and then the monthly is a little bit lower, I get it. But even if, like, gold stars for us, we're able to, suck out all of these pollutants and process this, industry, a company within Wilsonville still has to meet that federal, correct? So it's kind of just an exercise in showing how effective we are, but it doesn't really limit what they can put into the system, because that is, in our case, it's going to be regulated by the federal. Am I understanding it correctly?
That is correct.
Yeah.
That regardless of how wonderful our plant is, they still are held to the limits of the federal.
Okay. Okay. And those are, it looks like those are still, by and large, a lot of times, higher than what we have in the new category, our original, our old, or previous, sorry, not the new, the previous column. So are we seeing, like, what's really happening out in the world, though? Because we'd like to all imagine, I would think, that industry is getting cleaner, because we understand that the world should be getting cleaner or we're going to be in some trouble. Is that happening in actuality? Are we seeing things get cleaner, or are we just seeing that we're getting better at cleaning up the messes that we're making?
Well, I think the challenge there is, are we getting cleaner, is we don't have access to the information they used in 2004 to be able to say, in 2004, when they were taking the influent measurement, it was X, and now it's Y, right?
Yeah.
So we don't know.
Yeah, that would be great.
I mean, what we know is our plant is more efficient than it was back in 2004. I do believe, as far as industries, because as you can see, the federal limits are always going to be what's holding them back as to how much copper they can and do that. And if an industry cannot meet these limits, they have to peel it off and do their own pre-treatment.
Okay.
This is what they're allowed to, quote, flush down the toilet to us. But if they can't meet it, then they end up hauling it off to a different waste site.
It goes through a different channel of,
Yeah,
of
and
processing.
most industries, it's less expensive for them to be able to put it down the sewage line than to have to haul it off.
Yeah, so there's incentive to it. Okay.
All right, thank you. Great questions.
Quick one.
Okay, we're at 7.
Okay. Super quick, have any of our industries or business owners expressed that these are really prohibitive for them to do business with these numbers? Have we had anybody like say, oh my gosh, this is a burden for us and that we're having any difficulties?
No, in fact, I'll go ahead. and talk about
I'd like
the-
to share a little bit on that, Councilor West. It's actually a relief for the current industries. A couple of them, one has a hard time keeping that silver at that 0.11, and they strive to keep it below that 0.11 because every bit of silver they can keep is more silver that they can put back into their business. So they will get a little bit of relief on that with that 0.43 milligrams per liter over for a daily maximum, or the 0.24. So they actually receive a relief on their operating
Yeah, it's
expense.
better.
Like a win-win.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Great question. So our work session is adjourned, and we will re-adjourn in, what's our magic number, 7 minutes?
Well, we're live now, so we don't have that remote challenge.
Okay, so let's,
If you want a break, you can do that.
let's do a
too.
5-minute break and come back at 7:08, rounding up. script. Okay. I'll call to order meeting of the Wilsonville City Council for our regular meeting, Monday, October 3rd at 7:07 p.m. And I'll ask the city recorder to please call the roll.
Councilor Linville.
Here.
Councilor West.
Here.
Council President Ockerville.
Here.
Councilor Lehan.
Here.
Mayor Fitzgerald.
Here. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Council President Ockerville, may I have a motion to approve the following order of agenda?
Yes, Your Honor, I move to approve the following order of agenda.
Second?
I'll second.
Motion's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. The next meeting of our city council will be Monday, October 17th at 7 p.m. I have a brief summary of what I've been participating in since our last meeting. It wasn't as busy as it has been. I will say that related to one of our actions at the last meeting, preparing our Oregon legislative concepts that were originated by the city of Wilsonville, which, just to recap, we agreed on one concept, which is coordinated intergovernmental planning for the Aurora State Airport. Another concept of aligning SMART's territory with the city limits, and I was thinking about that quite a bit as we talked about transportation around Frog Pond, east and south, and roads and how people would move, and seeing that we would hope our SMART would really be able to serve that territory well. Their third concept was an Oregon Department of Transportation study that we forwarded as a legislative concept, which would be to extend the West commuter train to Salem, and that would provide further relief on our freeways if that were to come to pass. And the fourth one was to reauthorize the Oregon Regionally Significant Industrial Sites Program. And just to recap, that is to address a long-standing need to fund a plan that many in our state have been wanting for many years, which is to create some funding to develop industrial sites so that we can have more high-wage jobs and fill out that Basalt Creek area and Coffee Creek. So if these concepts are enacted, they would meet our city council goals. I did not get to participate in it myself, but I know some of you were customers at the city's fall bulky waste collection day event with Republic Services, and I heard lots of people comment on that. I understand, I received this from Mr. Ottenau, that we had a total of 280 vehicles that showed up for bulky waste day, which, speaking of Republic Services, helps keep our city clean, and it amounted to 30 tons of material for disposal. So if you missed bulky waste day, you only have to wait till next spring, and we will have another one. On Saturday, beautiful fall day, I attended the open house for the Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue's Charbonneau Fire Station number 54, and it's been open for about a year, but another thing that was caused to not happen, the open house waited for about a year because of COVID. But it was really a great day to meet a lot of the Tualatin Valley Fire Department Fire and Rescue staff and leaders, meet some of our residents of Charbonneau, and also Wilsonville. They were from different parts of Wilsonville. Wilsonville. There were some really little citizens who came and played with these fire station. They had some water brigade opportunities, and you could, of course, look at the fire truck. I think one of the most interesting things that I learned about that fire station is that it's using their new design. And this fire station is at the, if you leave the Charbonneau district and take that first exit onto I-5 North, you see the brick building to your right. That's where it's located, and it has a lot of facilities for the fire department. They're using their new design for locker rooms, and it's a really great example of the kind of inclusive thinking that is helping helping everything work better. So in the old days, you would have a women's locker room way at one end and a men's locker room at the other, and not just for fire districts, but for other things. And after a big event or scary or big incident that happens in fire departments, after the event, if you might be the one or two female members of the crew or the one or two male members, and there were more in the other locker room, you would not be able to be included in some debriefs that happen and discussions and kind of getting that collaborative discussion. So the new approach that they use for this fire station, it would be a little different for a larger station, but they have two rooms that actually they need two people to sleep overnight at any one time. So it has two beds, a shower, sink, toilet. So it's kind of a self-contained little apartment. But then the locker room and the place to store your things is in a shared area. So after an incident, everyone can debrief and develop that teamwork and camaraderie together. So they're just really pleased with that. And just a couple statistics, they tabulated that they responded to over 500 calls in the first year in that station and transported over 1,000 patients to area hospitals. So it'll provide faster response times to medical emergencies and allow it to more easily assist our Charbonneau district of Wilsonville in the case of a natural disaster. So if you'd like to arrange a visit there, I recommend it. And the other last point is I attended with some of our staff, Matt Lorenzen, our economic development manager, the economic development conference put on by Greater Portland, Inc., of which Wilsonville and a number of our neighboring cities are members. And we heard a great presentation, happened to be by Zoom because of a COVID intervention that somebody bumped into that virus. But we heard about the way that the city of Oakland has responded to homelessness and crime, and they had some really good solutions and also a lot of good citizen involvement. They're still working on it. There's no magic solution, but it's great to get that kind of input. And the city of Wilsonville, with a few other cities, was recognized as a heritage investor because our city has been involved in Greater Portland, Inc. for more than 10 years. So that was that. And with that, I would like to move to our communications segment of our agenda and ask for our PGE Green Power Energy Report, if we're ready to have that. It looks like it's coming on the screen. The magic of virtual meetings. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, good evening, everybody. Realizing my lighting is a little funny. Can you see me okay?
Yes.
All right, I will start the presentation. That presentation okay, everybody? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Well, hi, I am Lisa DiMartino. I am with Portland General Electric. I'm a product specialist for voluntary renewable energy programs, specializing in the commercial and industrial segment. And I am here tonight, and thank you for inviting me to discuss the City of Wilsonville Renewables narrative. Our table of contents includes reviewing objective and goals for the content I'm about to present, and then zooming out to review the U.S. renewable energy market, and then zooming back in to share with you the details of the City of Wilsonville and the community of Wilsonville renewable energy purchases over time. And then we'll review PGE's clean energy goals as the utility itself, as well as the voluntary programs that we offer. And then we'll close with some City of Wilsonville and PGE partnership, some recent partnership beyond renewable energy. So I'm sure many of you are aware that the city and the community has been purchasing renewable energy for many years, has been increasing purchases over time, and is part of the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA Green Power Partnership Program. And so the objective and goals for this content is really to tell that story more broadly of how Wilsonville is increasing usage over time, to provide some context from a national standpoint, and to really share detailed information about the different segments in your community that are participating. And so when I talk about the community of Wilsonville, I'm really talking about the city purchasing renewable energy, residential purchases, and commercial and industrial purchases. So as I go through the content, I'll just be clear to identify which of those I'm speaking of. In looking at the U.S. renewable energy market, the kind of main takeaway here is that the City of Wilsonville and the community is really part of a larger trend. Purchases in renewable energy across the country have been increasing over 20 years, and they are continuing to do so. And you can see the chart on the left is an example. It is the EPA Green Power Partnership growth over time. So I just mentioned the City of Wilsonville is part of that growth. You can see just in recent years, the growth is really year over year expanding at a more rapid rate than sort of in earlier years. On the right, I wanted to share that this growth is part of a bigger growth. There's compliance markets in renewable energy, whereby utilities like PGE are required to purchase a certain percentage of renewable energy. They are required to reduce emissions. Those compliance are getting more and more aggressive, more over time. But in addition to compliance, there's the voluntary market, which is also growing. And this is the market which cities like Wilsonville are part of. And this market is the EPA Green Power community market as well. The compliance market is completely separate. So digging into the City of Wilsonville and renewable energy, so the city itself has been participating in renewable energy since 2014, when you all entered into the EPA Green Power Challenge and joined PGE's Clean Wind program. That was the name of our program before we rebranded to Green Future Enterprise, which is what it is today. And over time, you have both participated in additional programs and increased participation in that Clean Wind or Green Future Enterprise program as well, all the way to 2022, where the city committed to reaching 100% renewable energy matching for 2022 and beyond. So the next few slides are zooming out a little bit to the community. So here here, we're going to think about the city-owned renewables purchases as well as the residential and the commercial and industrial. And again, all segments have been contributing to an increase over time, over 5 years, from 8 to 12%. That's been largely driven by residential customer growth, but the city as well has increased its purchases. And this is a similar graph, but the units are kilowatt hours. So Wilsonville community increased renewable kilowatt hour purchases by 62% over this time, again, driven largely by residential customers. And you can see the 45% increase from city-owned renewables. And finally, this is a view of the number of customers, which is really largely driven by the residential segment. I didn't show each segment on this graph because of the scale, but I have indicated the customer counts for 2021 for each segment. The city we also estimate that there's annual generation from on-site solar in the city. These numbers are actually not included in the EPA data, largely because PGE is not tracking total generation. We track sort of the net in order to basically build a customer. We are working on tracking generation so that we can provide more comprehensive information about on-site solar within the city. And so PGE is both part of that compliance market that we looked at previously in a few slides ago, as well as we offer voluntary programs for customers. So the compliance market is really twofold. The Renewable Portfolio Standard was implemented many years ago and requires PGE to offer or to include in its power mix a certain percentage of renewable energy by certain dates. There's a new law, a new clean energy law in Oregon called HB 2021, and that is a more aggressive way to reduce emissions. And so by 2030, PGE is required to reduce emissions by 80% to 2010 levels. And by 2040, we are required to have zero emissions from power served to customers. So this is an aggressive path, but for customers who are interested in doing more faster, we also have voluntary programs. These programs are called Green Future, and City of Wilsonville and its community, residential community and business community are enrolled in these programs. PGE has over 225,000 customers in these programs, and it is the #1 renewable power program in America, as ranked by NREL, which is National Renewable Energy Labs. And these programs help promote renewable energy projects and jobs in Oregon, and they allow residents, businesses, and the city to lower their carbon footprint associated with their electricity use. Participating in these programs offers benefits for customers to promote their participation. We also offer an impact certificate so that you know your exact kilowatt hour use and can use that for any reporting claims on an annual basis. And then finally, we have partnered together on other kinds of programs. Those are listed here, as well as Green Future programs. Do you have any questions?
Okay, well, thank you. I didn't want to interrupt, is that the last slide?
I do have appendices, but I wanted to pause to make sure I'm okay on time and to see if you had any questions.
I see that you do have a number of links where we can go into more detail, some contacts, and some other information. Councilor Lehan has a comment or question.
Yeah, I just had a question because we've heard this one before, and and we had asked before about the eagle deterrent systems, and I understand they were making improvements in that area, and are they monitoring eagle kills, and is that improving on the wind things?
Yeah, and I don't have exact numbers from a certain year to current, but I did ask about that, and PGE does report incidents to the Fish and Wildlife services, and so it is being tracked. I also understand that PGE, with our RFP process, includes site investigation to ensure that minimal impact on bird, including eagles and raptors, minimal impact in terms of where they're nesting. So that's the information I have. If
I
you
thought
would
they
like
were.
more information, I could find.
I thought they had come up with a couple of different strategies to keep them away from the blades, but I don't recall what that was, but there were things they were trying that would somehow warn them away. I don't know, something.
Yeah, I can ask about that. I'm not sure exactly what PGE is doing. I know that nationally there are a lot of ways that wind farms are trying to keep birds safe, like painting turbines or monitoring for when a bird is flying close to shut the turbine off. And I'm not sure what PGE is doing with respect to that, but if you would like, I can get more specific, detailed information, including numbers for you.
Okay. Thank you.
It would be good if you have a summary article that you could send us about that. And I know, when they do these wind farms, when they build a new wind farm, in order to be permitted to build it, they usually are required to do some kind of mitigation to account for that ahead of time. And I know there are articles that come out that I've seen recently on just what Councilor Lehan is mentioning. So if you can give us a summary article on something about monitoring of wind farms in Oregon, what are they seeing, and also what are some of the deterrent efforts that work the best?
Absolutely, yep.
Yeah, it's eagles in particular because they have such poor peripheral vision because all of their vision is ahead and down. And so they don't, they're a predator. So their eye is on the mouse and so they don't see those, blades.
Do you want me to say something about it?
Thank you, Councilor West.
Yeah, I know that that the wind farms, I'm lucky I'm married to a wind farm guy. So from what I've been told, they also will have spotters that watch and they also monitor migratory patterns of birds. And if they think that they're at risk, they will actually pay professional spotters and they'll radio in, shut down this wind farm. We have, a sighting of a raptor nearby that could, if they feel there's a threat. They also want to watch out for bats. That's another really vulnerable flying animal that has issues. They have like little devices, more than different kinds, not just different kinds, not that they put on the wind turbine. So I know they're doing a lot to try to mitigate that. Yeah, that's something to be interesting to hear, to see what she has.
Be great to get some feedback. And our local Oregon Zoo, which I have something to do with working on fundraising for that, and PGE has also helped with that, helps hatch California condor chicks that are released into the wild to mitigate for wind farm. That's one of the things that they do, and they have 500 in the wild now, or we do, because of this hatching and releasing from a few different bird sanctuaries and efforts. And we just had the first 2 released in Northern California. Most of them are in Arizona, so maybe they'll be inching their way to Oregon. But I would really love to see if you could send us a summary report that we could share with the council. Any other questions? Okay, thanks for the concern for the birds and for your report, and I think we should recognize that our citizens, our residents and businesses, as well as the city, are all participating in renewable energy, and I'm hearing the council has a big interest to make sure that as we do that, we don't negatively impact our birds. We're now ready, so thank you very much for your report, and we'll talk with you soon. Our next report is from Boones Ferry Primary, and or the Boones Ferry Primary Stormwater CEP project update with Mr. Reppold.
Well, thank you, Mayor, and members of the council. Great to see you tonight. So just a sec here. So I was trying to pull up my first presentation here. Did I just hit later on the... Thanks. I think it's this one. What's that? Yep. Yep.
Right up here. Bigger. And then share screen.
Okay.
And there you go.
Thanks. All right, I think we're there. Let's see here. There we go. Well, thank you for having us here tonight. So I'm going to actually be giving you 2 project updates. One is for the Boones Ferry Primary School, and one is for the Beckman Creek Primary School. So they both involved community enhancement funding. And with me here tonight are actually some guests that I'd like to recognize first. They represent some participants in both projects. So with me here is Leslie Campbell and Kira Iwazaki. I got that right, yeah. And they're both with Habitat Design, and so they helped with the landscape plan and worked on the curriculum actually for both projects that we integrated into them. And then also with me is Amy Schauer. She's the director of CREST, and Amy's been integral to all of this in terms of the partnership with the school district and everything we've done in terms of working together and trying to make these projects a reality over the last, I guess, more than 3 years. So the pandemic, as I'll talk about, kind of put a wrench into things and slowed things down. So, and then also, I'll have them introduce themselves later, but with me is some students from the National Honor Art. Yeah, excuse me there. And so this is Masha, and she'll be introducing the other students that were part of the project. Masha actually was one of our interns this summer, and she worked in the city manager's office. So she's been a great addition to some of the things that we've been doing here with the city. So let me get started here. So yeah, this is the Boones Ferry Primary project that actually started way back in 2019. And the project objectives were to basically integrate into the science-based curriculum stormwater management, or the study of it. And so we wanted to do a project that would really bring the students into this and get them involved. And so what we chose was an existing stormwater facility that's located on the Boones Ferry campus, and that area inside the red is the location for the bioswale. And one of the things you're going to get to see tonight also is a video that was prepared about the project, so you'll get a very close-up view in terms of what that area looks like. But it's an ideal location because it sits between the classrooms and then the library that's on the east side. And so it has a lot of visibility, and it's an area where the students walk through quite frequently, and it's, like I said, highly visible. So throughout this whole project, the students were, watching what was happening out there and being involved with it, and you'll see what that looks like. So. But we wanted to use this as kind of a demonstration site. It has the potential to be replicated with other school sites. We've actually had some of those conversations, what we could do with students in terms of replanting some of those areas. Kind of like the city, the school district can get very strapped in terms of available staff and resources. So we're trying to find some innovative ways to basically, keep these facilities as functional as possible. It's also going to be a likely research location going forward in terms of the bioswale, and students will be working with Amy and their teachers in regards to that. We emphasize definitely the use of native low maintenance plants, hopefully something that would minimize that ongoing maintenance. There were a number of invasive plants that we had to remove. One of the more challenging one was, they're not technically invasive, but cottonwood trees had grown inside the swale. They had volunteered themselves to be there. So some of those trees had to come out. And we may use some of what happened with this project in terms of informing our own standards that we use for stormwater facilities throughout the city. One of the things I'll show you is that we worked with the students and a company that the city has done a lot of work with, C-Reach, to develop some interpretive panels. And so there'll be 8 smaller panels as well as a larger panel, and that's the example of the larger panel that will be going in around the bioswale site. So it'll be very educational in that way in terms of informing future students, future teachers. Students were involved with every aspect of this project, from looking at the planning of it to doing their own landscape plans that they shared with us. We had a charrette way back in 2019 when this project first started, and they got very involved with the actual planting of it. We went from having 5th graders that were 7th graders by the time we finished this project. So that was kind of inspirational too in terms of their perseverance and their commitment. So one thing we'd like to do yet is the interpretive panels haven't actually been finished yet. The pandemic's kind of slowed that down too. So we're waiting for those to be finalized in terms of the fabrication, and then they'll get installed. And we hope to do a little celebration out there at the school site. This is just an example of some of the artwork and text that the students prepared. They're beautiful renderings that they did, so they cover everything from the flora to the fauna. And so there's 8 of these smaller panels, and all of them are really beautiful. And they were very, dedicated to looking into this and, doing their own research and preparing what you see here. And then, like I said, there's this larger panel that kind of tells the overall story of the project. So the story itself, like I said, is kind of interesting that we started back in the fall of 2019, and the project got delayed for 18 months. Basically, it went on hold in March of 2020, like many things. And we started it back up and then managed to finish it up this June. And so it was really rewarding to see that the dedication that these students, had to this project, the fact that they had moved on to Wood Middle School, they still really wanted to see this be finished and happen. It was a pretty significant effort to restore the bioswale. There was 90 cubic yards of existing material that was removed. A lot of, things that had come in over the years as far as the runoff. And then we had to install 80 cubic yards of what's called media, which is a sand, compost, and soil mix. And then ultimately 1,300 plants were installed in the bioswale. And it really improved tremendously the diversity of what was in there in terms of the herbaceous layer, the shrubs, the mixture of plants that we have. And it was very much a collective effort in terms of teachers and then the students. I mean, it was everything from, I believe, 3rd graders to 5th graders to 7th graders. And we even had the local Mormon church involved, where they were involved with planting as well as weeding and moving some rock around out there. So it became this wonderful community effort. And ultimately, there was about 600 hours that was devoted to it through all these volunteers. So this is the group of people that were all involved, and I was just hoping maybe Amy could come up and just speak for a couple minutes about, what this meant in terms of the curriculum and, the roles of the students that were involved. If you wouldn't mind just sitting here, Amy. Or yeah, right there is fine, right here.
Right here?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Carrie, and thank you, Mayor and members of the council. This project and the next project that we're going to talk about were exceptional opportunities to connect our students' science learning to the real-world context of their own communities. And I can't thank Carrie enough for coming to invite us to take part in these community development grant-funded projects. We had such a greater degree of engagement from students. They weren't just learning these science concepts that were already part of our science curriculum in terms of wetlands and the water cycle and aquatic ecosystems. They weren't just learning those in the abstract, but they were actually being asked to think about how we could help improve the watersheds and stormwater management in our own community. And having partners from the city come to visit the schools and talk with them as, potential designers and to think as scientists alongside these city workers was also very empowering. And I think it helped them. There were dimensions to this that I hadn't even anticipated. Not just did we improve their engagement with science learning, but we also allowed them to see that there are career prospects with the city that could be, if this was really interesting for them, that they could go on and maybe think about pursuing those someday when they're in high school and college. I did get an email just now from one of the teachers who couldn't be here tonight because she went home feeling not well, I'm sorry to say, but she said, she wanted to also express her gratitude for how wonderful the project was for all of our fifth graders. They were so engaged because of this hands-on, authentic project. And I think that word authentic really speaks to what we were able to accomplish here. So,
I believe so too.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Amy. So one of the things I wanted to add is that our Parks and Rec department was very helpful in terms of making sure this happened. They kind of stepped in and provided assistance, which you'll see in the video I'm going to show. Where they lent their technical expertise and some work to making sure that the project was finished. So hopefully I can get this video going here, and I don't see any sound.
So you've got to pause and restart because you've got to click the, so stop share screen.
Okay, thank you.
And then share screen.
Okay.
And then click that button.
So, oh, that's right, sorry.
And that, and then you want to share.
just love watching that every time.
Right up.
Yeah, so that was actually filmed by one of our parks employees too, Roger Moeller. He's very talented. He's done a number of these videos. So yeah, it's just been a truly wonderful project, truly great partnership with the school district, and I'm just really grateful to be a part of it. And so that concludes the Boones Ferry primary. And we can take any questions now, or we could wait till after the second presentation, whatever is your preference.
Looks like we can keep going.
Okay. All right, hopefully I can, so, I'm sorry. One of these days I'll figure out what I'm doing here.
I see some training coming up.
I might need some training, yeah, lots of it. Yeah. Where's my son when I need to ask questions? This one, yeah. Nope, the other one, yeah. Yeah, that one. Yeah. Oh, that's local limits, you don't need that. It's just this one.
There we go.
Yeah, cool.
Okay, so now we're going to make
Yep,
that
go
big
up there,
again.
yep, and then go to share.
Yep.
I'm starting to catch up. Yep, yep. All right. Okay, we'll get this going here. All right. So this was the second project, and this started actually the year after, originally in 2020, and then once again the pandemic delayed that, so we really didn't get this project started until September of 21, and that's where we finished up in June of 2022. And so this one had, instead of a stormwater management focus, it had watershed management. So we kind of broadened the scale and, tried to bring other elements into the curriculum at a different school and different fifth graders that we worked with. And so it was really a great opportunity in that way too. So the project objectives, similar to the first one, was to integrate watershed management into the science-based curriculum. This one, there was actually a Beckman Creek field visit that was conducted with the students, a little, field learning there. They also had a watershed fair, which they spent some time learning about water quality and organisms and things like that that are important in terms of our aquatic resources especially. I'll show you some example, once again, of some artwork that was developed for some watershed management posters. This is a piece we're still working on. We have the artwork from the students, but we're going to finalize them into a series of 3 posters with different themes. And those posters are going to go up at the schools and also here at City Hall and other locations. And you'll see the artwork is once again impressive. We developed a 3D watershed model. So you're going to get the unveiling tonight and get to see that. So it's actually a model that was printed in a large 3D printer. And with me here tonight are the students some of the students that actually painted that model. And I think you're going to be very impressed with what you see with that. I know I am. And so, like I said, there was a watershed fair that was held in March, I believe it was March of this year. And like I said, it was a hands-on opportunity for those students to do some learning, especially outside, and use some microscopes and learn about various aspects of watershed management. And then, like I said, there's this artwork that the students did, everything from the hydrologic or water cycle to, the idea of keeping our water clean and not dirty. I love this one, the Save Me Planet. That's a really nice piece of artwork. This one was ways to stop pollution. And then this one here, keep our water clean. So like I said, we're working on, Amy and I are going to work together still a little bit on this and try to get these posters finalized that will incorporate their artwork. And then the last piece really was the watershed model. And so this was a very interesting process in terms of trying to move this forward. I actually worked with a couple of employees here in community development, and fortunately they had the technical expertise to take basically what is our LiDAR data, our topographic data, and convert it into this electronic file or model. And this is the basis for what the actual 3D printer printed from. And so you have to use a special file type to do that. It was basically created in AutoCAD. And then ultimately, they ended up printing this. And so this is all specific to Wilsonville's terrain, topography. It takes in an area that goes out a little bit further to the north, a little bit further to the west, but it'll be a wonderful learning tool, and this is going to be housed over at Crest, and the city will have access to it if we want to use it. But literally, students, can put water on this model, and probably not too much water, but enough to show, I should probably check with Masha on that, yeah. But, so it'll just be a wonderful learning tool. And so what I want to do next is actually have Masha come up here and talk about the work that the students did, and if she can introduce the people with her here tonight and the other students that were involved.
Yeah.
Thank you, Masha.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. I'm glad to be here. As Carrie introduced me, my name is Masha Mironova. I am here as the co-president of the National Art Honor Society at Wilsonville High School, which I will further on be referring to as NHS, so that's what that stands for. I'm here with one of the other co-presidents, the second year running, Stephanie Yang, and our current vice president, Sophie Gordon, who both also did a lot of amazing work on the model. So I guess I'll walk through some of the organizational, the technical aspects, also, just how we actually did it in case that's of interest. So timeline-wise, we were reached out to, emailed by Carrie and Amy I checked before I came here on the 4th of January of this year. Then from that point on, and until I would say maybe mid-April, we were planning, kind of trying to figure out, what exactly we would be doing, how the model would look, what we need to plan for, prepare for. Then for a number of reasons, our first work session was, I believe, on the 21st of May, which was a 5-hour work session, which the photo on the bottom left here is from. We got quite a lot of work done. It was so from the technical point of view, what we did is we got the 3D model, which was in 4 pieces. We did a base coat with spray paint, then we used acrylic paint to put on the rest. And prior to this, we also communicated with Kira regarding, what specific parts of the satellite imagery we wanted to be on there, what specific parts we wanted highlighted, what colors to use, and so forth. Then, well, it says 3 weeks, just calendar-wise, but it was actually over 2 physical weeks. We did around 20 hours of work on the model, meeting with Carrie several times, also to, discuss some of the specifics, what we wanted to do, some of the alterations that were made throughout the process. And I think that here it's important to mention some of the people who worked on the model. So quite a lot of work was done by Stephanie, our last year's one of last year's co-presidents, Jesslyn Fernandez, also Sophie and myself, and other people that worked on the model were Cameron Azizi, George Lowe, and Macy Moore, who are all amazing people. I could talk for hours about the specific ideas that they came up with, the specific suggestions that were made, and also a special mention to Ms. Anjanette Escobar, who is our staff advisor and who was also instrumental in advising us on, what colors to use, what methods to use. So, for instance, one of the ideas that she suggested was if you take a look, there are some of the lightest green that was painted a beigey color, which we then decided wasn't really accurate or, and just wasn't a good representation. So then we went over with a wash, which is basically diluted acrylic paint. And I think that after that, we covered it with a sealant. To the best of my understanding, it can be wiped. I'm not sure about soaking it, but I think it should be fine. And I think that, to kind of wrap it all up, it was an absolutely fantastic project for us to end the year on. We learned a lot. For instance, we were kind of talking about it's kind of visible, the photo on the right in the left corner, kind of at the edge of the table, there is a quarry. We did talk for a while about it being a wormhole because it's an inch deep on the actual model. So yeah, that was interesting to learn more about the geography of the city and the topography and everything that's going on. And yeah, it's just great to have worked with the city and with Crest, and we're glad to, have contributed to this project.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it was truly wonderful working with the whole group of students, and I'm just really impressed with what you guys were capable of doing with this. So, I think that was really one of the more interesting parts of this particular project, that, we worked with both the primary school and the high school, and I like that connection that, was created in terms of the project, so thank you. So what I thought we'd do next is, if you would mind coming over here with me, and we can take the cover off and you can see what this looks like.
Okay.
See it?
Hey, Carrie?
Yeah, should we get a photo?
Can I get a picture? Maybe I can get the council to go up there too?
Yeah, let's do that.
Thank you. With all 3 students? And Zoe? You sure?
Oh, no, this isn't, I just give them a... So we get pictures.
Yeah, should we get them on this side?
I'll wait for the big unveiling.
Oh, I guess I should be in.
Yeah, Carrie, you got to be in there.
Where am I going?
Brian, you're missing a few.
I'm just sizing up how far I need to be back.
Sorry.
I'm not taking any pictures yet, though, but thanks. Appreciate the help.
Sorry.
All right, the city manager, I need help. Okay. I think I got everybody. All right, everybody, 1, 2, 3, unveil. All right, and everybody smile. And smile. I think I got one that Bill can use. Thank you.
Well, this is fantastic.
I'm not a professional photographer. Guy with light hair.
Yes, exactly.
Like Bill Road, I'm sure was.
You got it. Represents the development, various areas. I mean, everything is a little generalized. There's games, there's rainbows there. There's the river and Beckman Creek. There's Gina's house, I see it. Yeah.
Is the yard look nice?
I was struck by when I saw the model the first time, because I drive home Stafford Road, and I'm like, wow, you do climb quite a bit. It should be out of. Yeah.
It does.
Valley, aren't we? We are.
And so this topographical detail came out of the LiDAR and translated to...
Translated into 3D. What does LiDAR mean again? It's a company, actually, I worked with up in Seattle. Yeah, so they have that large 3D printer, and it's in, like, they can do up to 13 by 13 inches.
But isn't like, it's an X-ray of the ground, so to speak, and it can show where streams used to be and how to... It shows the...
LiDAR, what you're seeing of the ground,
Yeah.
not the vegetation.
The way I understand it, it's kind of a layering, the way that these 3D printers work. That's where our new bridge is going.
Like
Just
cake layers.
gradually kind of,
Is this the dip right now? Or is that the dip? That's the dip right now, right?
That is actually the bridge.
Is it? And look at how clean the river is with the...
That's the bluest I've ever seen.
You all do want to discuss this? It'd probably be great to have you mic'd up. So.
What's really fascinating on this model, though, you can actually, these are the EPA towers. They actually stand out.
So we will return to our desks for our continuing meeting, and I want to thank the National Art Honor Society. I would love to have been in that when I was in high school. I was in the Honor Society, but they didn't have the National Art Honor Society. And one of the members of your team lives next door to me, and I'm just glad to hear about how deeply all the students and teachers and staff and partners were involved in producing this. So we have more people all around the city who really know what the ground is like around Wilsonville. That's great. So what's the next step? And also we should mention our Wilsonville Graphic Arts class, Westland Wilsonville Community Development, all these partners. Great teamwork.
Yeah, like I said, that was probably one of the most rewarding things, just how diverse the team was and the people that came together to work on both of these projects, the dedication to them.
right. So
you.
that concludes our communication segment, and feel free to come back to our meeting anytime. We love to have in-person guests and participants.
Thank you, Mayor.
May I make a
we have
comment or a
some
question?
comments.
Before you step away, I wonder if I could just make a quick comment. Thank you for sharing this with us. It's just really an exciting and fantastic project, and the video, so very fun. I kind of wish all of our projects had a little time-lapse video like that where we could see it all come together. Very, very fun to watch it. You mentioned that there's going to be an unveiling of the plaques or something like that. I'm wondering if we can be alerted to when it is, because I would like to attend if it's something that the community could attend, just as a way of showing the students, and perhaps you can relay this to, since we do have some student representatives here, you can relay it to the other students that were involved, as just a way of showing that we honor and appreciate their learning in this area, and hope to see more of it, in the future. So please let us know.
Yeah, we'll let you know with the Boones Ferry project when we're ready to unveil the panels, and I'd love to have your participation.
That'd be great. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Any other comments? Okay, and we'll now move to our citizen input and community announcement section of the meeting. This is an opportunity for visitors to address the City Council on items not on the agenda. It's also the time to address items that are on the agenda but are not scheduled for a public hearing. Staff and the City Council will make every effort to respond to questions raised during citizens' input before tonight's meeting ends, or as quickly as possible thereafter. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. You can use the raise hand feature of Zoom to let us know how you would like, if you'd like to provide comments. Do we have anyone waiting? Okay, we'll move on to councilor comments, liaison reports, and meeting announcements, starting with Council President Akkerval.
Thank you. To report in, since our last meeting, I was able to attend, actually, there was a Civics Academy 2.0, I believe is what it was called, meeting that occurred last Thursday, and there will be a few of them this fall. I understand the next one's in November. It was an opportunity for people that have participated in the Civics Academy, or previously Citizens Academy, or previously Leadership Academy, to kind of come back and network and talk with each other, but also learn about some of the big projects that are happening in the city. And this last week, the topic was the Beckman dip, or the Beckman bridge, the Beckman road improvements. And it was really fantastic to get together with that group from, representatives from all the different cohorts that we've had. Excellent questions, and just a reminder of how fortunate we are to have these very engaged, informed, interested citizens that want to know what's happening in the city and want to know how they can be involved to, make things better and better understand the workings of city operations and why are we doing things a certain way. So if there are people that have participated in the Civics Academy, I'd very much recommend this 2.0. And if you're interested in doing the Civics Academy, perhaps you haven't participated in the past, we are collecting applications on the website until November 10th. Is that correct? I'm getting all the dates right? Good. And so please check that out and submit an application, because that is a very rewarding and valuable program that I think our city does do. Coming up, there is, well, first, I believe October 12th is the Safe Routes to School, the walk, bike, /ride, /roll, different ways of getting to school event. And I believe that many of our schools are doing activities that day in partnership with SMART. So if you're interested, you can look on the city's, or the city's Probably SMART's page, but also the school district's, the school events page, and find out more there. And for people that are not walking, biking to school that morning, but are perhaps in a car, let's have extra care with all of the walkers and bikers that are going to be on the roads too, now that school's back in session and we have a lot of younger members of the community that are getting around in that fashion. And coming up, the Wilsonville Public Library has started their fall schedule. So this includes the first Friday film series, a book notes concert series, and on the second Saturday of October and November is the concert series. So check that out. And also coming up this month is the Fall Harvest Festival, which is on Saturday, October 22nd. So that means that we all have just less than 20 days to finalize costume plans because that event is a fantastic event and it's free, family event. There's live music, there's face painting, there is a costume parade, there's pumpkins. It's quite popular with the community. So make sure that you have that on your calendar so you are able to attend. And finally, later this week, I will be attending the LOC League of Oregon Cities annual conference with, I believe, some of the other council members, and look forward to that event because it's always a good opportunity to learn a bit about what other cities are doing, what they're finding to be successful, and also get some training for all of us electeds across. So I'm looking forward to that. And that's it for me this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lehan.
Yes, I really don't have much this evening, except I will mention that I did go to Bulky Waste Day, and I was very impressed with how Republic Services manages that, how they manage the traffic in and out, and are, they are helpful for people once they're in. They just do an excellent job. I should have said that while they were here. So the other thing I would have asked, if I had thought of it, is they were collecting gift cards this time for the food bank. And they report how much waste they collected, but they didn't report about how much was contributed for the food bank, because that's the first time they had done that. It's been a food drive, but this time they specifically asked for little gift cards, cash gift card things for various stores. So that would be interesting to know how that worked out. If it was community sharing and see if they can report back. Yeah. But very successful deal.
Thank you. Councillor West.
First, I want to give kudos to the Parks and Recs Department here in the city. I had a little situation where some residents said, hey, the tennis pickle court lights aren't working. And so I said, okay, let me see what I can do. And it was an easy fix, and those lights are working. And I got multiple messages that those guys are super happy that the Memorial Park tennis lights are back on. So I love how responsive our city staff is to residents' concerns. I mean, the customer service mentality that our staff does is fantastic, and so we have a bunch of happy, active residents at our tennis courts, and so we like to hear that. One thing I think is really fantastic, and Council President Alcoval already alluded to this, but in another capacity where our residents can serve and get engaged, and I think we have a fantastic population that loves to get engaged in our city activities, because we have a bunch of positions available for boards and commissions, and so those applications are available now. We have Budget Committee, Development Review Board, the DEI Inclusion Committee, the Kikatata Sister City Advisory Board, Parks and Recs has two positions, Planning Commission. There are all kinds of areas to serve and get involved. So if you haven't done it before, please put in your application. And I know that there will be opportunities for many to get engaged. So that's happening. I wanted to make sure everybody knew about that. I have the the pleasure to serve with Councilor Linville on the Metro Community Enhancement Committee, which we just had the wonderful report, and now we have the model and a bioswale at the Boones Ferry Elementary School. So that happens because $1 from Metro for every ton of wet waste that is processed from Wilsonville or in Wilsonville. And so who know that waste and garbage and all that could be so fascinating and wonderful for our community, but it is, and we get to do things that not every community gets to do. And so another great project that just happened was the nature park down at Memorial Park. That was also due to these funds. And so we are meeting later this month, Councilor Linville and I, to start this process back up again with our Assistant City Manager Zoe and other community members. And is it Councilor Rosenthal, right? Is from Metro is going to be engaged in that process. We start that later this month. But application process for doing this all over again is starting later this fall. Is it November 1 to January 14th, or mid-January-ish is the application process. So people get your great ideas in so we can continue to have these wonderful things happen that enhance our community. So want to encourage nonprofits. I think the Boones Ferry Messenger, or the website, is a list of like qualifications, but it's broad and there's a lot of opportunities. And we've done so many cool things that impact our neighbors' lives, every single kids' lives, seniors' lives, people at the parks. I mean, it's all kinds of fun stuff. Historical stuff has been engaged in for our community. So please engage in those things. But that's all I have to discuss this time. But yeah, we'll pass it on.
And if people do fill out that application for the boards and commissions, it's helpful to note those that you're interested in. Some people say they're interested in all of them, and I will say the hardest part about it is the best thing about it is we have way more applicants than we have openings. That's a good problem to have. So we look back at the prior applicants and just try to fit that in, but we still need more volunteer opportunities for all of these great willing residents. But do apply, because we have rotating openings throughout the year. And now, Councilor Linville.
Well, I have nothing much to report since all of my colleagues reported everything that's going on. I did attend on the 30th of September the Clackamas Workforce Partnership Board Retreat. It was a Zoom meeting. There were representatives from an incredible list of community agencies, from Clackamas Community College to PGE, and these are people who are volunteers on the board. And the focus of this particular retreat was to look at the vision and mission of the organization and to give some feedback in to see whether it still is the mission and vision that the organization should have today. And I don't know if Councilor Lehan wanted to mention anything about the Grand Ronde tribes renaming the property at the Willamette Falls. That is fairly new. Did you want to talk about that?
You go ahead. I just recently resigned.
Oh, you did? Oh, you did? Okay.
Well, off of Willamette Falls and Landings.
Oh, Willamette Falls and Landings. Well, yeah, and just a little background. In 2019, the tribes, the Grand Ronde tribes, acquired the former Blue Heron paper mill on the property or adjacent to the property of the Willamette Falls. It's a 23-acre area, and they have been in the process of demolishing and have a vision for how they want to rebuild that property. That is old tribal lands that they used both for ceremonial and for subsistence, for fishing. And they have named the area the Tumwata Village, not not to be confused with the Washington Tumwater Falls, which is up in the Olympia area. And so I think people will begin to see that as that is recreated and reimagined. And I look forward to the community enhancement meeting on the 25th as well. And I just wanted to quickly mention, just for folks to put on their calendars, that we will meet again before these two events happen, but the leaf drop date, bag up all your leaves and get them ready. That date is November 5th on a Saturday at City Hall from 9 to 2. And then the paper shredding day, which is Saturday, November the 19th, again at City Hall from 9 to 2, or when the trucks reach capacity. So get here early, bring all of your shredding, and it's wonderful, I think, services to our community. So thank you.
After all of that, it's going to be all cleaned up, right? So thank you, Councilor Linville. And that brings us to our consent agenda. If we could ask the city attorney to read the resolution by title, please.
Resolution number 2994, a resolution of the City of Wilsonville establishing local discharge limitations to control conventional, non-conventional, and toxic pollutant discharges from non-domestic industrial users of the City of Wilsonville sanitary sewer system, and repealing resolution numbers 1267, 1504, and 1888, and the minutes of September 19, 2022 City Council meeting.
Your Honor, I move to approve the consent agenda as read.
I will second.
The motion's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
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 Motion passes 5-0. That brings us to continuing business. If the city attorney will please read ordinance number 868 and 869.
I think we'll handle them separately.
Oh, totally separately?
Yep.
Please read them separately.
Oh, sounds great. So this is the second reading of ordinance number 868, an ordinance of the City of Wilsonville annexing approximately 4.92 acres of property located north of Southwest Frog Pond Lane at 7315 Southwest Frog Pond Lane for development of a 12-lot residential subdivision.
Thank you. So tonight, we will consider on second reading ordinance number 868. Public testimony was accepted during the public hearing, which was closed after the first reading. I ask once again, do any members of the City Council wish to abstain, declare a conflict of interest, or report on any ex parte contact or any information gained outside of the meeting?
No.
No. At this time, does staff have any follow-up information to present, or do any members of the City Council have questions for staff?
No.
Georgia.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, Georgia McAllister, Associate Planner. We have not received any additional information or public comment on the project site since the first reading on September 19th.
I didn't see her on my screen.
Okay. May I have a motion on the ordinance on second reading?
Go ahead.
Your Honor, I move to adopt ordinance number 868 on second reading.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
The motion's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion among the council? Seeing no discussion, hearing no further discussion, I hereby ask the city recorder to make a roll call vote. As many of us are in favor of the enactment of the ordinance will, as their names are called, answer aye. Those opposed will answer no. Those who wish to abstain from the vote will answer abstain. The city recorder will now call the roll.
Councilor Linville?
Aye.
Councilor West?
Aye.
Council President Alkervall? Aye. Councilor Lehan?
Aye.
Mayor Fitzgerald?
Aye. Ordinance number 868 is approved on second reading. If you desire to appeal this decision to the Oregon Land Use Board of Appeals, you must file a proper notice of intent to appeal, stating the grounds of the appeal and in the form and within the time frame prescribed by state law. Will the city attorney please read ordinance number 869?
This is the second reading of ordinance number 869, an ordinance of the City of Wilsonville approving a zone map amendment from the Clackamas County Rural Residential Farm Forest 5-acre RRFF-5 zone to the residential neighborhood RN zone on approximately 4.07 acres located south of Southwest Frog Pond Lane at 7314 Southwest Frog Pond Lane for development of a 12-lot residential subdivision.
Thank you. Tonight, we will consider on second reading ordinance number 869. Public testimony was accepted during the public hearing, which was closed after the first reading. I ask once again, do any members of the City Council wish to abstain, declare a conflict of interest, or report any ex parte contact or information gained outside of the hearing?
No.
No. At this time, does staff have any follow-up information to present, or do any members of the City Council have questions for staff?
We do not have, or staff does not have any more information to present tonight, Your Honor.
Hearing no further discussion, I hereby, or excuse me just a minute. I'm going to ask you once again, do you have any discussion about this item, staff?
No.
Thank you. Hearing no further discussion, I hereby ask the city recorder to make a roll call vote. As many of us are in favor of enactment of the ordinance will, as their names are...
We don't have a motion on the floor.
Oh.
I move to adopt ordinance number 869 on second reading.
I will second that motion.
Thank you, Councilor West. I knew I would need some clues. The motion has been moved and seconded. Is there any more discussion after that? Hearing no further discussion, I hereby ask the city recorder to make a roll call vote. As many of us are in favor of enactment of the ordinance will, as their names are called, answer aye. Those opposed will answer no. Those who wish to abstain from the vote will answer abstain. The city recorder will now call the roll.
Councilor Linville?
Aye.
Councilor West?
Aye.
Council President Ockerville?
Aye.
Councilor Lehan?
Aye.
Mayor Fitzgerald?
Aye. Ordinance number 869 is approved on second reading. Thank you. Is there any city manager's business?
Just one item I wanted to pass along to council, the nature park that was mentioned earlier won a Oregon State Parks Award.
Wow.
Nice.
And two of the employees that were instrumental in that are also receiving an award. So when we get those awards, we'll present those to council and the community.
Great news.
And I did mention to Councilor Lehan that there is a tree expert from Oregon State that will be coming down either this week or next to look at the Kinsman oak.
Okay.
They suspect some kind of a bug infestation, but we won't know until that person comes down to look at it. So when I get that information, I'll pass that back to you.
Good to have that update.
Okay.
That's a great university to call upon in these times.
Is there bias there?
Is there any legal business?
No legal business tonight, Mayor.
I hereby adjourn the meeting at 8:25 p.m.